Okay, in this demo, I want to talk a little bit about resolution, and so that you understand the difference between print resolution and web resolution. So one of the things is, if you've used Photoshop before, that you may have been focused on would be probably some sort of print resolution, which is typically about 300 ppi or higher. Um, you can get away with as low as like about 150 ppi for laser printers, but um, anything that's going to be a nicer print is typically 300 or higher. So it's a little bit different though for web. For anything that's going to be displayed on the screen, it needs to be a 72 ppi resolution, and that would include web. And so, for instance, if I go up here, I have this squirrel image, first of all, and it looks really small on the screen right now, but if you'll notice down here, it says 16.67%. So it's only showing us about 17% of the actual size of the picture. So if I go up here to image and I go to image size, you'll notice in the resolution window that the actual dimension is 4032 pixels wide, which is huge. If you were to blow this up to 100%, it would be more than 2 times, actually almost 4 times, the size of my actual current resolution that I have set. I want to show you something really quickly. If I go over here to my system preferences, let's put these side by side. Right now I'm on a, well, let's try that again. Okay, right now I'm on a laptop, and you'll see here that I've got this resolution. It says that it's scaled, and over here down below, if I hover it, it says looks like 1280 by 800. So this is a 1280 by 800 display of my resolution. Now, that means that it's 1280 pixels wide that it's displaying on my screen, whereas this image is 4032 pixels wide. So that's significantly larger, right? So if I wanted to, I'm just going to cancel this for a moment. Actually, the other thing I want to show you too is the resolution you see is set to 72. And that's because a lot of cameras now, most cameras now, come by default set so that they take even high resolution images at 72 ppi. A lot of times whenever you're working with print, high resolution means that it's a high ppi, right? So that it would be right down here, it would be like 300 or higher. Well, just because something is high resolution doesn't mean that it's necessarily 300 or higher ppi. So a high res image that you take straight out of the camera, for instance, it would be coming out typically at 72, but the actual pixel dimensions right here, the width by the height, are enormous. All right, so this is very, very large. And just so you know, you probably should have learned this in some other class. Since this is an advanced class, you've probably taken some other ones, at least, if nothing else, at least the beginning Photoshop. So you probably learned that if you take off the resample, it is now constraining the resolution, this PPI resolution, to the actual pixel dimensions of the width and the height, so that the real dimensions that are up here where I have my mouse, right, are not going to be modified if I adjust the resolution here. So if I change this PPI to 300, for instance, you see that that changes it in inches. And you see also that pixels now goes away because it doesn't want you to confuse the actual pixel dimensions with something that would be a unit of measure for print, like inches or centimeters or something like that. Right? And so, but you'll notice that the original pixel dimension up here at the top where it says dimensions, that hasn't changed. So this is a non-destructive edit whenever I am not resampling. If I were to put resample back on now, the problem is that I have a picture that it's at 300 ppi. So it's going to be a little bit awkward, you know, for web resolution. So let's take that back off and let's change that back to 72 and put resample back on. Now, something that you also should have probably learned is that when you have resample on, you never want to just come here and just automatically change the resolution, because what you're going to do is you're going to artificially inflate this actual pixel dimension. So if I were to change this to 300, you see what happens is that this gets really blown out and the quality is terrible. And it's now saying that it's 16,800 pixels by almost 10,000 pixels. Well, that's ridiculous. That's not legitimate. It's fake, right? So what it's doing is it's making up information in all of the pixels that it didn't actually have any real information. And so by doing this, you're creating a very poor quality image. So let's take it back to its 72 ppi. All right, but I just want to show you that really quickly so that you understand the relationship about how resampling and not resampling works, right? If you take off resample, you are doing a non-destructive resolution edit. If you leave resample on, you are doing a destructive resolution edit, right? If I were to lower the resolution, and by the way, there's no reason in the world that I should lower this below 72 ppi because there is nothing that is going to display or print anywhere below 72 ppi, all right? But if I did, it would lower my actual pixel dimensions and literally throw that data away. Okay, just so you understand that. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that for a moment and let's just see what this looks like if I go down in this bottom left corner and I change this to 100%. All right, that's 100% of the actual size, and you'll notice that it does not actually fit on the entire screen. Like I said before, my screen dimensions are not set up to be that big. If I take my hand tool, I can sort of move it around, right? I can just toss it around and see what the rest of the picture looks like, right? But that is still literally not fitting on the entire screen. To help you understand a little bit about why web resolution is really important, you also need to understand that pixels equal bandwidth. So the higher the pixel dimensions are, the more bandwidth it's going to take. So for instance, if someone's looking at a website on a phone, then you don't want them to be loading a picture that is 4,000 pixels wide. That's just ridiculous because most phones, well, no phone in fact, is going to be able to even show the entire picture in its entirety at its actual 100% size, right? Even this laptop can't do it. And furthermore, something else that I should point out is if I were to go into my system preferences again, let me show you something. Even if I were to increase my resolution here, that's only 1920 by 1200, and that's on a 15-inch laptop, right? Even a 27-inch, let's say Apple display, right? A 27-inch monitor, gigantic monitor, that is only going to be about 2,500 pixels wide, right? So this 4,000 pixel thing is just ridiculous. And you'll notice here, the lower the resolution, and this might seem kind of at first contradictory, but it's not. The lower the resolution you have a monitor set, or the smaller your screen dimension is, the larger something is going to look. So like if you look here at this, when I'm hovering over the 1024 setting, you see how large that screen window looks, right? That exact same thing at 1280 looks like that. At 1440, it looks a little bit smaller. At 1680, even smaller, and at 1920, even smaller, right? So that gives you some sense of how the bigger the resolution of your screen is, the smaller an image is going to look, because it literally, the image isn't going to take up as much of the percentage of the screen real estate, right? So these are some important aspects to understand, okay? And one of the things that you can do to kind of just help yourself understand this too is that you can go up and let's just say File, and then I want to just save something for web. I want to optimize it for the web. So I'll go to Export, and then I'll just go to Export As. Now, if you've ever used Photoshop for web in the past, one of the things that you might have been accustomed to using is this Save for Web. It is now legacy underneath Export. It used to be just right out here as Save for Web, but it's no longer there. So if you're coming back to Photoshop after a while of not using it, the new Creative Cloud version has put Save for Web under a legacy thing, which means it's probably going to go away eventually. And that's where, let me just show you what it looks like. It's where it used to give you, or it still does, I guess, at the time of this video being made. It'll give you like a 4-up option where it allows you to choose some different options for image files, okay? I'm not going to I'm going to suggest that you not use this, and there are some different reasons. One is this PNG 24 is a little inaccurate. PNG 24 with transparency technically is a PNG 32, and so this is sort of disingenuous. It's a little misleading. Without the transparency, it is truly a PNG 24. That's just something that you should be aware of. And this is a gigantic file, so it's taking a long time to kind of do anything. There are some things that are nice about this screen that I still like. In fact, you know, it'll show you the comparison side by side of your different file types that you've chosen. So you can still use this, but one of the other disadvantages of it is that it doesn't work well with Photoshop's artboards. Artboards are something that Photoshop now has as an available, well, not available, but as a standard thing that when you create a file, it's going to create an artboard. And so you can have multiple artboards sort of like you do in Illustrator. But this saving screen doesn't work with artboards. So I'm going to hit cancel, and let's go back up here and let's use the more preferred way now of saving out one individual image. So if we go to export, we can go to export as. Here we've got this screen for export as, and over here it shows you, it's important to notice these dimensions because it shows you the size it's going to be exporting it as. Well, what I want to do is I want to make it smaller. So for our demonstration, it would be a more web optimized image. So let's do it at, let's say 1600, and you'll notice that it automatically adjusts the height. All right, and then this is showing it at 25%, so we can either use the plus symbol to blow it up, and you can see that that's at 100%. All right, so it's a much smaller image. And you can see that I'm choosing a JPEG. I could choose PNG, GIF, or SVG. SVG doesn't make any sense at all because that's a vector graphic. GIF doesn't make a lot of sense because I need a good tonal range for this. PNG is an uncompressed larger file, and that would be okay if I needed the transparency, but I don't. So I'm going to choose JPEG because I can actually use compression with a JPEG to make the file size a little bit smaller. And the way that you compress it is you adjust the image size, or excuse me, the image quality, I should say. And so I'm going to lower it to about 70 or so, and that's a pretty good, it's still a high quality, and that'll probably render out a pretty good image, right? And so you'll notice here that I have on the left, it says that it's going to export it out as 1600 by 902. So I'm happy with that. And this 1x means that that is at 100%. That's 100% of the size. So I'm going to come over here, and it automatically also adjusted the canvas size for me. If for some reason it does not adjust the canvas size, you have to actually click off of the width when you type it. If you don't, and then you just hit export all, and the canvas size isn't adjusted and this isn't adjusted, then it's actually not going to make it a smaller file. So after you type 1600, you need to at least click like in the height field or up in the quality or something like that. And then where it says convert to sRGB, we want that. S is standard, so it's standard RGB, which is what the web defaults to. All right, and if you wanted to put your copyright stuff, you could. All right, and I'm going to keep the sRGB instead of a embedded color profile. And then I'll say export all. And I'm going to export it into the folder where the original squirrel file was located, but I'm going to append this file name with -1600, so I'll know that it's the 1600 file. All right, I'll export that. Now I'm also going to make a much smaller file size for comparison. So we'll go to export, and then we'll say export as again. Okay, and this time I'm going to make this a, let's say 400 pixel wide file. Okay, and I'll leave the quality the same. And you'll notice that when I clicked off of it, it adjusted the canvas size and the size over here. And then if I wanted to look at that at 100%, you can see immediately that that is much, much smaller. So I'll say export all, and I'll say that this is squirrel-400. Okay. The other thing I want to do lastly is I do want to show you, if I go and one more time, let's do another export just so that you can see it for comparison purposes. Let's do another one that is at 1600. And remember, I'm not changing the original, I'm not changing the original size of the file that I'm working on. You'll notice that when I go back, I'll show you in a minute, but when I go back, the original size is not going to be modified to 1600. All right, this is just the export option. The other thing I want to do is I want to show you in a JPEG, like if I lower the quality pretty low, so you can see like the difference in quality, and you can see the difference in file size. All right, and so that went from being much higher down to 91 KB. If I look back up here, it's 70 where it was. That was 284 kilobytes. If I go down to like say 20 or so, it's 91. So it's a significantly smaller file size with greater compression, but we'll see how the quality ends up looking after we export it. So I'll say export all, and here I'll do dash 1600, and then I'll put dash 20Q for quality, okay? Yeah, so let's try that. Now, you'll notice, like I said before, if I go back up to image size, my exporting didn't modify this original high quality, high resolution image, which is exactly what I would want. All right, I wouldn't want to destroy the data in the original file. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to jump over to my Finder where the folder is, where I saved all that stuff. And I'm going to open a browser window and scoot this over a little bit. And one of the easiest ways to just sort of visually see how big your pictures are is you can just take a picture and drag it into a browser window. All right, and and I want you to notice this isn't the actual size. See how I get a little plus symbol with a magnifying tool? If I blow it up, that's the actual size. That is gigantic. No way it could fit on this screen, right? Okay, just so you can see, it's got a really nice quality. Let's open a new tab and let's take a look at the 1600 pixel one. And you'll notice here I also still am getting a magnifying tool. I can blow that up. That's still larger than my actual screen, but this is at 100% versus that being at 100%, right? So you can definitely see the difference in the resolution scales. Let's look at the 1600 20% quality so that at 100% you can see the difference in the quality, all right? And if I look at it side by side, you could make a decision about whether or not the quality of the image is really going to be, you know, negatively affected so much that it's not worth the extra savings in bandwidth, right? So I'm looking at this and I don't really think that it's that big of a difference. I think that I might actually lower, but not for every image. It's not always going to be that way. The one place where you may or may not be able to notice it, though, and it might not be acceptable, is you can see the artifacts and the gradients up here. Artifacts are all these little pixelated boxes. If you look at the better quality image, it looks a lot smoother and a lot more fluid. Over here where it's 20%, you start to see the pixel breakdown of the gradient, like in here, right? And if I blow it up even more, you can definitely start to see the boxes of the pixels, right? Whereas if I did this and I blew it up, you can't really see it so much, okay? Now let's look at the 400 image, and you'll really get a sense of how much smaller it really is. That's 100%, right? So it helps you to understand. I think maybe this little demonstration can help you understand. Let's yeah, make it so that that's 100% right there. Let's zoom back out. Okay, that's at 100%. That's at 100%. So you can see the difference, right away. Okay, so anyway, hopefully that'll help you understand resolution a little bit better and why different web resolutions are going to be more important. Like you would want this to load, for instance, like on a mobile browser and not this, right? Because the bandwidth is outrageous. And if you wanted to get the information about each image, you could see, you know, that this 400 image, it's only 25 kilobytes, whereas these other ones are gigantic in comparison. And considering that a lot of people pay for the data on their phones and mobile devices, that's a really big deal, all right? So anyway, hopefully that helps you understand the resolution stuff a little bit better.